Hello, this is Dr. Dave Gatros for COP 3353, Introduction to Unix, and what I want to do with this particular video is go over some of the solutions to assignment number 6. I've been looking at the grading and I've seen lots of attempts, and I kind of wanted to show you the three basic methods to solve this particular assignment. And I'm going to go over them in the order that I think you probably approach them. The first one is using for loops. Now, if you'll recall, and we'll bring up the assignment. Here it is. You're to write a script where you pass in a directory path, and it's a complete path name. And in it, you count the total number of directories that are in the directory, the subdirectories that are in it, the total number of files that do not include the directories, and of the files and directories, the number that are readable, writable, and executable. None of these should include hidden files. So that's kind of the basic requirement. And you should also check the parameter that's passed in to make sure that it is there is a parameter and that it is a valid directory and readable. Alright, well, let's take a look at them. The first one I've got here is using for loop, which I think is you probably think is the most straightforward. It's the longest. It's the one that takes the most code. And let me run it for you. And they all start out with assignment 6, but in these particular case I tag it with the for loop, sh. And you notice when I hit enter it says usage assignment 6 directory. You need to put in a directory. And of course, if I enter in something that is not a directory, it says no such directory. Well, the directory that I have set up to work is one in home directory, faculty, just the test directory. And you notice you have to end this in a slash. That's the best way to do it. And this one has, I also print out a test message, not required, that it's readable. Statistics on the directory, and I list the directory. There's 2 directories in that directory, 7 files. 6 of them are readable, 5 are writable, and 6 are executable, and that is the correct answer. Alright, well, let's take a look at this particular solution. We'll go and edit it. Assignment 6.-4. Okay. And you'll see we have the shebang up there. That has to be the first one. I have my comments. And this one is I check to see if the number of parameters is less than 1. Otherwise I print out the usage. I check to see if it's a directory. And then I print out whether it's readable or not. Then here's the echo for the statistics on the directory. Okay. And here is I set up the for loop. Now I have these variables, the number of directories, the files that are readable, writable, and executable. And then I go in a for loop. Now this for loop is, again, in bash. I do for. I is the loop invariant that I'm going to actually assign the variables to. And notice I have the $sign on the outside, which turn this into a variable that I can use. This runs the ls command on the whole directory itself. So one at a time it actually gives me the files itself and puts that in I. Okay. Now a little trick here, and this may not be obvious to a lot of you, and this is what made this one just a little bit tough. Herein I'm checking to see if it's a regular file. Now you'll notice that I have to put the parameter in front of the I have to give it the complete path name. If I just use I, it's looking for that file inside the current directory. So I either have to do that, or if I don't want to put the $sign right there, right here I can say cd $1. I can change to that directly, and then I can actually leave the $sign off in here. So it's either one will work. So what I do is if it's a regular file, then I add one to the file. Notice I'm using the let command. I'm saying let files is equal to files plus 1. Notice I don't have to use the $sign when I use the let command. If it's a directory, I add one to the directory. If it's readable, I add one to the readable. If it's writable, I add one to that. And then I just print them out at the end. That's probably the most straightforward one, but again, it's the most code. And since it's the most code, it tends to be the one where you can induce a lot more errors into it. And the syntax of these things tend to be a little tricky too. Like for instance, this $1, $I, that one was probably kind of tough to to figure out. Alright, so that's that one. That's the for loop. Okay. The next one is the find. Okay. Less code, but the find, a little trickier syntax. Again, the first part's the same. That doesn't really change very much. So here I have. Notice I don't have to put it in a for loop. I'm using the find command to actually find it. So I echo out the number of directories that title, and you notice I'll use the -n option right here. The -n option suppresses the carriage return at the end of the echo. So what happens whenever I print out the number of items, it doesn't go to the next line, which is kind of handy. Here's the find command. Now you notice I use the find command. You put the parameter right there, and I put the period behind it. Some of you may be inclined to put the asterisk right there, and that may appear as if it gives you the correct results. It really doesn't, because there's multiple subdirectories underneath the directory that you're looking at. It'll pick those up too. Even though you've got max depth of 1 right there, it'll go ahead and pick them up. So the periods is what you use. However, because you're using the period, it picks up the hidden files too. So the way we get around that is we have max depth of 1, we have type D is directory, but we have to say don't pick up the ones that have a name that start with a period. That is what not name and then the quote period asterisk means. Don't pick up the ones that start with a period, and then pass that to word count and count every line, and that gives us the correct results. The find command works very similarly for all of them. Works the same way. Here is F for regular files. This one is for readable, writable, and for executable. And that's how the find command works. Little tricky syntax there. Again, what's going to catch you right here is two things. Is the using the period right here instead of the asterisk, and the dash not dash name. Okay, good. Now the last one, which it turns out to be the shortest, but again it uses regular expressions, and this is using the ls command. This one I experimented this, so I checked the first parameter to see if it was blank, and it works the same way as the other one. Checks to see if there's one there. Here's the ls command. You'll see it's very short, very compact. Okay. A little different though here in that you see the ls command. When I'm looking for directories, I have to use the asterisk slash after it, and that picks up all the directories in the current directory. That's a little trick right there. Of course, I pass that to word count, and I count the number of words. I could also put a 1 right there and count the number of lines. It would have worked the same way. But here is, I'm a little tricky. I'm looking at the number of directories, readable files, writable files, and executables. So let me show you something a little bit here. I'll show you a little trick I used. And bring up another window, and let me go to the home directory that we're going to test. Let me do a long listing here. Okay, now you'll notice that this produces a line right here. And if we're looking at them, and I'll just do an ls-l. Let me do that. I don't want to use all the hidden files. If I just do a -l, what it does is it gives me all the regular files and not the hidden files, which is very nice. That's exactly what I want. If I look over to the left, I'll notice that anything that starts with a D is directory, so I can look at that. I notice that anything that starts with a dash is a regular file that's not a directory. Okay. I'll also notice that if it's read, writable, or executable, those appear in specific columns. So I look at that, and then I go over here and I look at my ls command. Okay, and you'll notice too this here's the number of directories. Well, what I'm looking for here is again, I can either do it this way. There's another way to write it. I can just do the D command, or here's another way to write that. It can be done like this too. Okay, ls, okay, $-L, and then $1, and then I pass that to grep, and I'm looking the caret symbol, looking at the beginning of the file, looking for a D, and then I pass that to word count. And that's the same way. If I look over here, it says, okay, it starts with a D. Now I look at the next one for the number of files. Again, I'm looking for one in grep right here. I'm looking for grep. I'm looking for anything that caret symbol means start at the beginning of the file, starts with a dash, right? Then this one right here, the period actually means ignore that character, ignore the first character, and just look for the R. And if I look over here, I say, okay, well that makes sense because I ignore the first line right there that tells me if it's a directory or not, and then I'm looking for the R, and of course writable, excuse me, writable, I'm ignoring the next two characters, and then executable, I'm ignoring the first three characters. This actually turns out to be the easiest, most accurate one to use using regular expressions. But you may not have been brave enough or confident enough in regular expressions to actually try it. Well, those are the three solutions, and there are variations off any one of those, and then there are probably other ways of doing it, but these are the three basic approaches. I encourage you to go back and try this again. Try write them and actually try to write these three, and feel free to use this code to practice with. I hope you had a good assignment experience, and on to the next one.